Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 13th round of the FIDE Candidates 2021. After today's round and tomorrow's round, we will know who is taking on Magnus Carlsen for the World Championship match in November later this year. Going into today's round, Nepomniachtchi has a half-point lead against Anish Giri, and MVL is not too far behind. As always, timestamps are on the video player, and I'm just going to say we're going to go a bit faster today, because in 24 minutes, I'm sitting right in this chair and starting commentary on the new Chess Classic, so I'm going to have to go a little bit faster, filming the recap in between the free time. So our first game of the day, Kirill Alekseenko versus Liren, and this one begins with an Italian knight to f6, d3, bishop c5, and both players castle. Now, this is going to lead to a very maneuvering game, unless black lashes out very quickly with d5, which is actually exactly what Liren does in a little bit of time. He plays this move d5, even though he's already played d6, he plays d5, and this leads to an opening of the position in a way where your e-pawn is quite weak, and it's going to be a target. But there's a kind of compensation in chess, especially in these e4, e5 systems, known as martial compensation, where after takes, black plays this move c6, and you hold the center together, and then your bishop comes over here, and oftentimes you've got a sacrifice of a pawn, but you've got very active lines. You have active, dynamic, aggressive lines looking at the enemy king, and the position is very okay. And Liren is very familiar with these positions, but it's a risk that white has to take to potentially walk through fire and emerge on the other side, and that's exactly what he does. So he gives away the bishop, so now black gets this bishop pair, and the way you play against the bishop pair is you hunker down, and you very, very slowly put your pieces on their optimal squares. And that's exactly what Alekseenko begins to do. He covers all his weaknesses. Actually, his structure is totally counteracting the light squared bishop. If you notice, 6 of his pawns are on light squares. He defends everything, and Liren constantly searching, looking for something. Queen comes into a1, but he's fine. It looks a bit scary. The queen comes back. And now this bishop comes alive, and all of a sudden, you know, again with this king h1 to move out of the pin, so you want to move your knight, maybe a rook here in the future. Like, Alekseenko was doing a great job. This is move 30 now. They shuffle, but he's making progress. And even this trade isn't necessarily beneficial for Liren. In fact, it splits his pawns. But since the b pawns are traded, the b file is open, right? So long term, there is still this kind of lingering effect. We have a4 trying to take a little bit of space, queen e3, queen g5, offering a trade of queens. And again, you would think just takes, I'm out material, this is good, but it's actually not. Black's bishops are so strong, and the constant threat is looming here to infiltrate on the b file, so trading the queens is no good, which is why he repeats. And then he says, I actually don't want a repetition, I want to play this until the 40th move. Because on the 40th move, I gain an extra bit of time. Okay, this is move 40. Now I have my extra time, and I'm going to try to work and outplay you. And so rook d8, queen c3, and Ding starts to come in with the pawn on the other side of the board, h5, h4, right? So he takes, and Ding sacrifices a second pawn. Now Ding has 4 pawns versus 6, because he's just all in. But this still shows the power of the bishops, because, man, I mean, these bishops are really annoying. They are very dangerous for white. So bishop f5, knight d4, and here Liren gambles. And he plays this move, which just gives away a bishop, like for a pawn, and forces you to go here. But because this bishop is constantly not allowing this king forward, the looming threat is queen e1. Also, there is this pin, and there is now this pin. So you have this pin, and the constant threat of a back rank mate, not to mention queen f4 and then mate this way. So Alekseenko here has to make a decision. How does he guard his knight? Bishop b2 or bishop c5? Well, he chose wrong, because after rook b8, he has no way to stop the infiltration. He had to play bishop b2, allowing this, and then there's some way here where it looks like you're losing a queen, but you're not, because of check, king h7, and knight to g5. Maybe that's what he missed. Maybe he thought that bishop c5 was safe, but after this, Liren sacrifices the rook, takes back the rook, and then just gets this and comes in with the bishop. The only hope that Alekseenko has now is getting a perpetual check, and he's just not able to do it. Liren's king goes for a run, and I know it looks crazy. It looks his king is so unsafe, but it's just the queen. And by virtue of board geometry, here Alekseenko resigns, because he just can't continue to check. He's got no checks this way, and if you play something like queen f5, then I go king b6, you have no more checks. And if you go queen e5, then I can probably just play, like, for example, c5, queen e8, and, like, king here. And you can check me, but I'm just gonna run around. Like, I'm gonna run all the way back here. And your queen's just offside. And so Alekseenko resigned rather than, you know, continuing to check. And Liren wins. Our second game of the day, Wang Hao versus Fabiano Caruana. This one is a Sicilian. Again, Caruana knocked out of a chance of competing for the qualification spot. Early on, we have an Alapin. This is c3, a little bit of a delayed Alapin, trying to go d4. Knight f6, e5. And now pawns clash in the center. Very kind of standard play for the Alapin Sicilian with d6. Bishop c4 played by Wang Hao, trying to take the knight. And, well, Caruana says, yeah, by all means, go ahead and do that. Castles, castles, a3, bishop d7, takes. And now he's isolated this pawn, and that looks very nice. That's like a juicy target. And optically speaking, this position just looks very solid. So again, structure is completely identical. 3, isolated d pawn, and then a and b. Okay, that's wonderful. Yeah, but rook e1. Rook c8, queen d3, f6. Important move, f6. If you like Ben Feingold, you might not play this move. But it's important to cover the infiltration of the enemy knight and hide the bishop, because now you can actually successfully fight for the file, and bishop is coming to g6. Rook c1, queen d7. Fabiano is kind of like lurking, looking what he's going to do, taking on a light squared approach. All his pieces are on light squares. The knight does control the dark squares from the light squares, but in the future, it really would like to end up over here. Which, well, save that, because I can almost guarantee you that move will happen. Fabiano slowly improves his position, plays, well, I promise that the move knight a5 is going to come. First he plays h4. The idea to attack here with the flank pawn in front of his own king is to disallow Wang Hao from taking space and just kind of plant these pawns here for the endgame, not let them move out. And now he plays knight a5, now he plays knight c4. This move b4 is a catastrophic weakening of the light squares. And I think Wang Hao actually wanted to go for this position, but he underestimated just how bad this is. Like, this is a great move, offering up the knight for the bishop, but because you are going to get a protected pass pawn, this is always going to be good for black. This pawn is a lingering reminder of the problems of your position, and there's nothing that you can do to defend it. This pawn will fall. And so for that reason, you know, ultimately Wang Hao tries to go for an attack on that side of the board, and now Fabiano shows his very nice understanding of the game, locking down the queen side, getting a nice advantage here, and putting the final crack in the armor of Wang Hao. And after d5, bishop g6, he's just improving. Queen to f4, that's another very nice move, because if you take my queen, I go here and it's check, and then I win you back. And now a nice one again, bishop c2, using the pawn expansion on that side of the board to bring in the bishop, to bring in the queen. All those moves enabled by the same side advancement. Now rook e5, with the intention to trade and pin the knight to the queen. And these guys make it look so easy. Like, he just brings the bishop back to round up this pawn, d6, bishop c6, the pawn's not going anywhere. The knight is now not hitting the bishop. And after queen b2, queen d6, Wang Hao, again, had enough. You could say he's only down a pawn in the endgame. Why is he resigning? He's resigning because he doesn't want to do this anymore. Who can blame him? He's just had enough, Wang Hao. I mean, he's just the same thing. And so Fabiano wins. But that brings us to the two most important games of the round, ladies and gentlemen, okay? First, we have the game between Nepo and MVL. Nepo's got the white pieces, and he needs to not lose. And so he goes for an English, d4, and notice the setup that MVL is going for. MVL goes for a double fianchetto, which is a weird setup. It's a very offbeat and peculiar non-standard setup. And now d5. This is really the problem, because black doesn't put any pawns in the center, so white occupies the center and develops around it. They both castle, queen c2. Idea of queen c2, cover the squares. You want to go b4 to kick this knight out, so black plays a5. Nepo has to take no risk in this game, so he just brings his rook to the middle, he develops his bishop, and then he plays solidly and guards his pawn over here. And this position is just very strange. It's a very strange position. If white could have it his way, he would unpin his rook, play e4, e5, vibe, and win the game. But, and you know, he kind of begins these operations by trying to trade off the dark square bishop for black, which is black's best piece. MVL now plays the move e6 because he's trying to instigate. MVL has to win the game, you know, or he's not going to make it to play Magnus. So takes, rook b1, and now this move e5. And black is beginning to get a good King's Indian because you've traded off bishops, but your king is not weak at all. You have good central presence, and actually, maybe black is going to start getting things done here. Knight d2, f5. Okay, this is starting to look like a game. I mean, especially if you're going to get e4. But suddenly, Nepo goes from just, you know, lackadaisically just playing solid chess to, all right, I'm going to try to punish you now. This knight is the first to go. I'm kicking out the knight. Get out of my house. Okay, now e4. Whoever told you you're going to fight for the center? If you take me, my knight lands here, this is game over for black. Because I'm going to just kick all your pieces out. So that forces MVL to play this move. And now he plays knight back to e2, kind of saying, hey, what are you doing here? I'm going to try to close this whole side of the board down and then dominate you on the queen side. MVL plays pawn takes g3 to open things up, and now you're supposed to take toward the center, but FG3, intending to open up the file for the rook. But here MVL, according to most commentators, got his best moment of the game, and he played the move c5. Because this makes it difficult for white to decide what to do. If you push, the knight just lands on b4 and your position sucks. Because the rook is coming, this knight can always reroute this way, you're going to bring in the rook, maybe attack with the pawns. But if you take, well then black is obviously going to take with the pawn and then play knight to b4 and all the same stuff. But MVL didn't do that. For a reason I don't fully understand. I haven't had a chance to speak to MVL, actually ever in my life, but today, I don't know why he didn't do this. This bishop is not hanging. Instead, he took with the knight. He sacrificed the b-pawn completely. And I guess his intention was, well, I'm going to open that side. You know, Nepo still can't do anything to me with this blockade. And I'm just going to roll him down the queen side. And it's true, he has compensation. But Nepo just played very solid. I mean, he just won his pawn and came back and said, okay, now what? And the truth is, there was not much. His position is solid. It's not the prettiest position, but he just trades everything and trades queens. And now this is hitting both. You have to trade, because otherwise you just come here, and this is a depressing reality. You bring in my queen, and I destroy everybody. So he just traded queens, and, like, they shuffled around for 8 moves. Nepo defended all his pawns, and they made the time control again. Nothing is happening, right? I don't really have to commentate, and they agreed to a draw right here. So I don't know. I don't know what went into that decision to sacrifice the pawn. I mean, MVL was honestly making some progress, and then he just decided not to take with the pawn. And so Nepo draws to go an extra half a point up, and that brings us to our final game of the day. Anish Giri needs to defeat Alexander Grischuk, or at least he needs to draw to stay in the running. We have d4 knight f6, c4 e6, and this is known as a Queen's Indian defense. One of the best openings in chess, very solid. Black plays bishop to b7, bishop g2, gives a check, and now Anish makes a deliberate attempt to imbalance the position. Imbalance in chess can be anything. It can be bishop for knight, it can be pawn structure, it can be material. So he plays the move c5 to guard his bishop, right? So after takes, this is kind of peculiar, and it leads to just a unique structure, right? There's no c-pawn, like this is open, but, you know, after castles, knight d2, like, the truth is that white is just, like, happy here, you know? Like, white has a very solid position without much weakness, and Anish is the one that has to decide whether or not he's going to play this position for a win. And at the same time, he's looking at Nepo's game, right? He's looking at that game going, wow, Nepo's got a really good position, because this is move 11, and it was true that Nepo had a good opening, so, you know, Anish just finishes his development, and now Grischuk plays knight e1. Just a very solid move. He wants to trade bishops. Okay, we have a game with no pointed hats on the board. And Anish plays a move that he would probably normally never play, and that move is h5. Same side attack, just trying to soften up the structure here, you know, inviting the damaging. And Grischuk just ignores it. He's like, I don't know, it's like a, you know, an angry homeless person on the New York City subway. You just kind of don't make eye contact or they'll, you know, attack you. So you just, I don't know what Anish is doing. So takes, and now rook to b8, just defending the b6 pawn. So Anish is just belligerently trying to imbalance the game, but he's taking inherent risk, right? Like, his knights are not really that great. Grischuk's knights have future prospects. The b file is open with just a very clear line of attack. Knight c7, rook b1. Anish tries to bring his knight to the game, right? Which is very logical. but now rook b5. So rook b5 is a funny move because you can kind of attack the rook and just repeat. And I don't know if that's what would have happened, but I am sure that that crossed Anish's mind. The fact that that repetition might occur. I mean, of course, Grischuk doesn't have to go to b1. He might go to b2 and just double up, but that could occur. And Anish is like, you know what? I don't want that. Instead, I'm going to kind of try to instigate on this side of the board. And he plays the move knight d7 with the intention most likely to take, so these squares free up, and to plant the knights in the middle. Knight f1, and he does exactly that. He puts his knight on e5, but he's taking massive risk because, again, the light squares are weak. This is weak. This is weak. This is weak. Everything is weak. You're not weak, though. You're incredible. And so queen comes back, takes, knight c6, and, like, positionally speaking, white is dominating here because white's weaknesses are here, but you're never going to get them. Whereas my rook pressures everything. My knight is coming to d5. The only chance you have is to really create some chaos with a move f5. And, well, Anish ends up going for it. The problem is that after queen takes d6, there is nothing. You're just going to go a pawn down, and then the endgame comes, and Grischuk is just up 2 pawns. And the rest of the game is Grischuk converting his 2-pawn advantage. Anish trades, they trade everything, and I wish I can provide you better commentary at this stage, but I simply cannot. It's knight in 5 versus knight in 3, and, you know, he centralizes his knight, and ultimately he pushes and brings in his king. That's exactly what happens. He pushes, brings in the knight with the threat of bringing in the king. And it was on knight c5 that Anish Giri tragically resigned and surrendered his chances of becoming Magnus Carlsen's next challenger. This video recap is shorter than most of the ones that I have done, but Jan Nepomniachtchi wins the candidates. It's guaranteed now. And he will take on, and I'm a little sad. I'm an Anish Giri fan. I'm not I'm not frustrated that Embo won, but I was cheering for Anish Giri. And so, ladies and gentlemen, November 2021 in Dubai will be Magnus Carlsen versus Jan Nepomniachtchi. Jan Nepomniachtchi, one of the few players still on Earth actively competing who has a positive score over the years in classical chess versus Magnus Carlsen. It's going to be fun. I will still do a recap of the final day tomorrow out of respect to the players, but congratulations to Jan, who did not even participate in the most recent one in 2018. So this is big. This is big, and he has arrived. And, yeah. That's going to be a fun match because Nepo brings something exciting and interesting to the table. Different openings, maybe different openings every game we might see. And just kind of an inherent chaos, a beautiful chaos that he brings to the table. So hopefully you enjoyed this recap. An interesting end to the candidates tournament. We will be back tomorrow, just again out of respect to the players. But Magnus versus Jan, baby. Here we go.